Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good Monday, everyone, and happy President's Day. It's the 15th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that on Marine VHF, NOAA Weather Radio, or weather.gov/Alaska. As always, give us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find information during the day and in between Alaska weather on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. Around 4 o'clock, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing on YouTube at NWS Anchorage. And of course, you can find updates on Twitter using the hashtag AKwx. And anytime you'd like to share a photo with us, whether Twitter or Facebook, you can certainly do that. Just make sure you tag us and leave a comment if you like. Here's how things shape up across the rest of Alaska as we head into tonight. Out across the west, in the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and the Bering Strait communities, we're watching for a blizzard warning in effect now. And as a result of stronger winds and the potential for some heavy snow, especially focused on St. Lawrence Island, where we could see as much as about 4 to 7 inches of snow in some cases. Out across the west, you might see as much as 7 to 12 inches, up to a foot on St. Lawrence Island. We're expecting winds to come up pretty sharply tomorrow afternoon and really ramp up as we head into Tuesday night and Wednesday, and that's when the blizzard warning will be in effect. The winds will come up from the south and east about 30 to 40 miles per hour sustained, with gusts over 50 miles per hour for this region. So we have the wind, we have falling snow, and we're going to have poor visibility if all those things come together. The visibility could reach whiteout conditions again in some cases. So be prepared for rapidly changing weather, especially tomorrow afternoon around St. Lawrence Island and the western sections of the Seward Peninsula there. A blizzard warning is in effect, and expect conditions to change very quickly tomorrow afternoon, continuing through Wednesday, 6 p.m. Not to be left out will be the Yukon Delta region north of Hooper Bay to just about Stebbins there. Winter storm watch is in effect now, watching for not only snow to fall, and could see upwards of 6 to 9 inches there, but we are going to see some healthy southeasterly winds across your region too, those coming up to 55 miles per hour. Don't be surprised if you get some of that wind and some of that snow around the Bethel region and northward. You're not under any advisories, watches, or warnings just yet, but that could certainly change with time. So keep an eye out if you're in the YK Delta region from Bethel and northward, and certainly around the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and for St. Lawrence Island. Conditions will be changing. We'll take a look at the surface maps here in just a minute, but let's set the stage with what we see on the satellite picture first. We have a large system moving through the central and eastern Gulf. That is tracking north and east and heading for southeastern Alaska with a little bit of rain and wind. The main focus with this should probably be on the southern parts of southeast around the Clarence Strait and the southern outer coast. In the meantime, a new system has made its way into the western Bering, and you can see the clouds quickly moving north and east as a result of that. Warmer air is spreading northward, and this is moving across Adak and out toward Kiska already this evening. Not a whole lot going on across the interior. We do have clouds, not a whole lot of snow showers reported with this. A few spots there around the higher terrain, seeing some light snow and snow showers. Most of south and western Alaska has had a fairly quiet day all the way down the Alaska Peninsula into Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, Kodiak Island, and a fairly balmy day, in fact, across south central, where we're just not seeing a whole lot of cloud cover at all. The sun has been brightly shining. Out across the North Slope, the winds are settling down. They're not completely calm, though, and there has been some blowing and drifting snow across the region. You can still see the remnants of the disturbance that sat across the North Slope for the last 2 days or so, locking out air traffic for parts of Barrow, and things have slowly been returning to maybe somewhat normal, but they're on the mend, it sounds like. Out across the west, then, let's focus on what's coming out across the western bearing, since this is the new game changer as we see it across the west coast. Here is the weather map, and at 966 millibars, the low pressure system is now south and west of the Gulf of Anadyr and west of St. Matthew Island. Warmer air is working across the chain, and with that, some pockets of rainfall. Everything's pretty dry and fairly calm across the west coast right now. But as I said, as we go into the next 24 hours or so, things are going to change pretty quickly. Low pressure across the eastern Gulfs at 983 millibars. Remember, this is tracking to the north and east. Everything across the interior is pretty quiet, save for a few snow showers and leftover areas of light snow across the Chukchi seacoast. By tonight, the next weather maker will be just west of St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs. The Pribilofs should expect to see rain and snow showers out across the west and northern Bering Sea and into the Gulf of Anadyr. Winds will be picking up very quickly from the south and southeast. Expect to see blowing and drifting snow start tonight and early tomorrow morning. But as we get into the afternoon, we'll see conditions rapidly change over for St. Lawrence Island, areas north of Nunivak Island, the Yukon Delta, probably around Bethel as well, and into Norton Sound and the western half of the Seward Peninsula. Those conditions will continue to worsen as we head into the afternoon tomorrow. For southern parts of southeast, a frontal boundary lifting your way will bring another round of rain and milder weather for you. The winds will come up a little bit more if you're extremely close to the Dixon entrance or perhaps moving through those waters there, as well as places like Ketchikan and Annette. You'll probably see some changes there. Out across the central Aleutians, the winds will be a little bit stronger as we head into Tuesday and Wednesday. A little bit more of a westerly flow develops into the midweek, and we'll see a better chance for some light snow showers across the Alaska Range and especially the western side, with a few more clouds throughout the day for tonight and tomorrow. Now, as we head into Tuesday, look at the pressure gradient tightening up. This is a pretty good sign that winds are going to be moving right along across the western coastline of Alaska and into Norton Sound, the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and eastern sections of Siberia and Russia. The front will be working its way across the central chain with rain. The rain will be spreading northward, maybe as far as Nunivak Island, and again the YK Delta will likely see periods of rain and snow gradually becoming more mixed with rain than snow as that warmer air is working northward. For places like St. Lawrence Island, again, this will put you square in the bullseye of blizzard conditions, and with a blizzard warning in effect, we should expect and plan for 7 to 12 inches of snow around St. Lawrence Island, a little bit less for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula there. As we get across the Gulf, conditions will be fairly dry there with a ridge of high pressure briefly in command. Low pressure working northward will continue to bring a better chance of rainfall, and this should be rain across southern parts of southeast. Look for periods of snow showers across the Alaska Range with a better chance for heavier snow to work away from St. Lawrence Island and into the mainland there as we get into Wednesday. That will take the strongest winds out across the western coast, but behind that, don't forget, is a much colder flow coming in behind it. Periods of snow and blowing snow will continue through the day on Wednesday, even though that frontal boundary has passed. And as that works into south and western Alaska, look for rain and snow to commence there, and a better chance for that to fill in across the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas and into south and western Alaska, maybe even into Bristol Bay with periods of rain and snow there. Better chance for all rain for Kodiak Island, parts of southern Cook Inlet and into Prince William Sound. Periods of rain and snow showers may mix around Cook Inlet, but right now this is still a pretty dry setup for us in Anchorage and the Matanuska and Susitna valleys, so we still got to get the moisture and kind of that cold to set up shop in order for this to be a really good precipitation maker for us at this point. Out across the west for the eastern, central, and western chain, showers of snow will start to wind down a little bit more as colder air is filtering in, and already you can see another weather maker just on the western side of your screen here at 992 millibars by midweek. We'll see where that ends up, but right now the main path of these storms is kind of up and over and then dropping back down. So that is expected for Wednesday. Now for the North Slope, one thing to keep in mind, while you won't have a whole lot of clouds initially, it does look like the winds will start to pick up again as early as Tuesday night or Wednesday. So if anything you can do to prepare for more blowing snow is possible, Wednesday would probably be the day that you'd start to see that pick up once again across the North Slope. For southeast, rain showers continue for your region. Look for periods of scattered and light rain, but the core of that last system will have dropped off toward the Pacific Northwest as another weather maker is working across the Gulf in your general direction. Let's look at the weather pattern. Now let's take a look at temperatures today. Back in the lower to mid 40s for south and east, 43 in the capital city, 44 in Juneau, mid to upper 40s for southern parts of southeast. Ketchikan, Craig, and Klawock enjoying a fine day. 37 in Valdez today with 40 in Cordova. The Cook Inlet region in the upper 30s all the way from Anchorage down to Homer and Kenai. 30 around Cantwell today, 34 for Talkeetna. It was 10 degrees in Fairbanks, 17 in fact in Eagle. Fairly mild today. Northway only 8. 10 in Fort Yukon. It looked like 17 in Tanana earlier today. Ambler and Bettles in the single digits and teens today. 9 in Arctic Village. 5 below for Barrow. 3 below in Kaktovik. Shishmaref was showing, Kotzebue was 3. Tin City was 9 below. 1 below in Nome with Unalakleet at 10 degrees. 18 in Grayling. 14 in McGrath. 18 for Bethel today. Nunivak Island saw 18 as well as St. Lawrence Island. A little bit colder there at 0 on around Savunga. And out toward Gamble, it was 6 below, 9 below again in Tin City. The Pribilofs in the mid to upper 30s. Kodiak Island in the 30s and 40s today. About the same for the Alaska Peninsula. Sand Point was 41. About the same exact temperature there for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Mid to upper 30s for Adak and Atka, and 36 on Attu. Southeast temperatures tonight in the upper 20s to as warm as 40 degrees, in fact, as you get out toward Ketchikan. The South Central looking at temps in the low to mid 20s around the Anchorage Bowl, a little bit milder as you head out toward Homer and Seward. 22 around Valdez, 30 in Kodiak, 10 above for Fairbanks. Again, a fairly mild night for you. 10 or 2 below for Eagle, 15 below for Arctic Village, and 12 below for Barrow. With the wind settling down, it will still feel cold. 5 to 15 below around Kotzebue Sound there. Shishmaref, one of the colder spots. 2 below in Nome, with McGrath looking at temperatures in the mid-20s tonight. 15 above for Bethel. Bristol Bay temperatures back in the upper 20s. The Alaska Peninsula in the 30s with St. Paul at 33. And Dutch Harbor and Unalaska about 36 with a high of 43 tomorrow. Kodiak Island in the upper 30s. Mid to upper 30s to about mid-40s for southeast. Some of the southern spots, again, some of the warmest. South Central looking at temperatures at or just below freezing in the upper 20s to as warm as about 39 in Homer and Seward. 38 in Kodiak. In the middle Tanana Valley, low to mid-teens should do it tomorrow. 8 above in Eagle. Looks like 7 above for Bettles, 9 below in Arctic Village, 5 below for Barrow, 13 above for places like Shishmaref, 24 above for Nome, and around Bethel, with conditions changing as we head into the afternoon and evening hours, upper 20s to mid-30s for you. St. Paul again, 37. Flying weather shows IFR conditions still hovering across the Point Barrow region from the central and western Beaufort Seacoast all the way into the Chukchi Seacoast at times. And then, of course, along the leading edge of the front through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, the Yukon Delta, parts of the Kuskokwim Delta, and the central and eastern chain with MVFR for many other locations. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see MVFR to VFR conditions there. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, they expect IFR to VFR conditions, so some improvement noted there. As we get into Rainy Pass, IFR to VFR conditions are expected throughout the day. Not as much improvement for Windy Pass, starting out at IFR during the day. Isabel Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions transitioning to MVFR. Mentasta Pass, we expect to start at IFR for your Tuesday. Tanita Pass, probably heading for VFR by the end of the day. And Portage Pass also seeing some improvements after a start at MVFR in the morning. Chilkoot and White Pass right now look pretty good. There will be clouds, mainly mostly cloudy, a broken sky, but it looks like conditions should be okay to get through. Freezing levels show the wealth of warm air surging into the southern Bering Sea. Here are the Pribilofs, and look at that warm air aloft, anywhere from 2 to 4, even as high as 8,000 feet in the vicinity there as we go through your Tuesday morning. The surface freezing line also jogging northward quickly, north of St. Matthew to just about Nunivak Island. And around the Gulf, you've got a little bit of a warm or colder air trying to drop southward into the central Gulf, but the surface freezing line by and large has not changed all that much. Icing potential will range all the way from the Bering Strait above 3,000 feet to about the Pribilofs above 6,000 feet to around Dutch Harbor and Unalaska above 10,000 feet with a chance for occasional moderate. There's also a ribbon of moisture hanging out across southern southeast, snaking its way through the Yukon and just north of the Alaska Range, so about below 5,000 feet or so, a chance for some isolated moderate there. Here's a look at the jet stream, and you'll notice one thing, the main trough of low pressure shifting eastward. That's making room for a big punch from the jet stream coming in around 150 knots right over the Aleutians, and that's what's fueling the big punch of that western bearing storm moving into the west coast. In the meantime, at now 9,000 feet, we have a pretty potent weather maker here with southerlies coming in at 45 to 70 knots across the central and eastern chain and the western coast. Winds are much slower coming off of the Alaska Range and over south central and into southeast, starting out around 25 knots and slowing to around 10 by the time they reach the Panhandle. Southerlies are also going strong at 3,000 feet here, 50 knots pretty much all the way from the Aleutians to the Bering Strait, coming due south. And look for more of a southeasterly flow across the north slope from Kaktovik to Point Vero, about 30 to 40 knots. Winds are light across the Kenai Peninsula and the interior. And we have a little bit more of a northerly flow coming across the Panhandle and over places like Yakutat, about 15 to 30. So as far as turbulence goes, this will be a changing weather story throughout the daytime tomorrow and certainly by Wednesday. Watch for at least occasional moderate across places like Tin City and all the way out to almost Nome, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, the Yukon Delta, St. Matthew, the Pribilofs. Watch for more and more wind and more problems as we go with deteriorating weather as we go through Tuesday afternoon and certainly into Wednesday morning. And watch for some chop across the central chain as the front blows through. And still watching for low-level wind shear and probably some occasional moderate for the north slope. And again, Wednesday should look considerably worse for the west coast. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flat. If you tuned in last time, our guest was Walter Combs. Walter is the project director, I'm not sure that's his official title, but he's the guy with his team that manages the Weather Cams program. And I gotta tell you, if you ever flown around Alaska, those weather cams are so helpful, and they're not standing still. Walter talked a bit about some of the improvements that are coming down the road, and that's where I want to pick it up. Welcome back, Walter.
Thank you.
And thanks again for all the work you've put into this program.
Sure.
You mentioned a couple things. Maybe I can recap it for folks. The 228 systems right now?
Yep, 228.
And you picked up 60 some in the Canadian side.
That's correct.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't looked on the website recently, you need to, because there's a whole bunch of new dots there. And you can see places in Canada you may have visited when you brought an airplane up or took one down to the lower 48. Great improvement. Also, you mentioned the work you're doing down at Misty Fjords, putting in a couple of cameras down there.
That's correct, yes.
In an area that really traditionally has been difficult.
Yes.
You mentioned to me another exciting idea called an aviation data portal. Is that what you call it?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Talk about that.
Well, we've had a website to distribute our data, our images, and last year we decided to upgrade that website based on pilot input and feedback. And in the past, it was kind of an archaic website. We took what we'd say is the new technologies and started putting them together, my team did, and we've come up with what we're calling a weather data portal. The intention is to provide camera images and other weather data products and flight decision data products on one website is what we're doing here in Alaska. It's very successful. We've had about just over 200 million hits in the past year on the website. We're really excited about that, and we've got a lot of great feedback on the website. One of the I think we would call it the primary or the key or reasons for the success is that we provide data that a pilot can access on a route. So he can go to the website and he can go from camera image to camera image along an intended route. So based on that, we have several more upgrades over the next couple of years that we're doing to the website, and we're going to expand on that process where you can develop a route and receive the data, all the pertinent data or data that's pertinent to that route. And we've termed that new process or that new capability as route-based data acquisition is what we're calling it. So the idea is that you can access the data and only the data on your intended route. So you develop a route on the website or on a mobile app, which we're building now is two mobile apps, one for iOS and one for Android, and you can develop a route right on the platform and access data on a 20-mile corridor each side of your route that you've decided. So now you're not downloading all that extra data and peripheral data to your device or to your computer when you're doing your flight planning. You just load the data that's pertinent to that route, and it really makes it faster and easier. We're also adding a lot of new data products that a lot of pilots need and they're looking for. So we'll have AirMets and SIGMETs and NOTAMs and other data on the website as well.
So I don't think I asked you this last time, but when are the cameras going to be up and running at Mr. Fjord's?
Oh, we'll have those operational by the end of the flying season this year. So sometime in September is the date we expect. Now we're trying to get them in faster. We already have our site engineering done. We've selected the 2 locations we want to go to. We're working with the U.S. Forest Service down there to get our their lease agreements with them to install our sites on, and they'll be remote powered sites, so they'll be wind and solar powered sites, and they're pretty nice new facilities that we've developed over the last few years. So anyway, we'll have those hopefully launched by mid-season instead of the end of the season, but
do the best job we can.
We work hard. We usually hit our targets.
How about real quick? How about the other the aviation data portal? When's that going to be up and running?
The data portal again is also this fall. We'll launch the new upgrade this fall. We're hoping to have the iOS and Android apps out a little bit earlier than that. So we'll see.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, again, Walter, on behalf of folks that use this system, thank you very much. It is a great aid to aviation safety.
You bet.
Thanks for
great.
being on the program.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Until next time, fly safe.
As for the National Weather Service, those aviation weather cameras are invaluable, and anybody that you talk to that flies anywhere around Alaska has clicked on those links. If you haven't lately, check them out. The site is a wonderful tool to use for aviation all across our state. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and you can see things have changed a little bit, but not too much since we talked again just yesterday. Those north and easterly winds are pushing the ice slower, a little bit closer and closer to St. Matthew, still running around 30 to 35, about 40 nautical miles to the north and west. However, we've been talking about that sizable storm out to the west. That's going to change the ice edge and probably move that northward in some fashion as we head through the rest of the week. So keep an eye on that if you're watching the ice edge across the Bering. Changes are afoot, and mainly just a cold, icy foot. Here's a look at southeast, and winds are fairly light across the northern parts of the outer coast. 15 to 20 knots, 8 to 10 foot seas there. More of an easterly flow south of Sitka. Northerlies coming down toward Craig. An isolated risk for a thunderstorm as we head into the afternoon tomorrow. Northerlies for most of the inside waters, 20 to 25 with a southeasterly flow inside of Clarence Strait with a 7-foot sea on Tuesday. That becomes northerly at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Wednesday. Northerlies in the Lynn Canal. Light easterlies from Yakutat all the way through Cross Sound and Gustavus and then down toward Sitka. About 15 knots there with a 7-foot sea, and northerlies south of Sitka 10 to 15 with a 7-foot sea on the outside for Wednesday. Here's a look at south central. Winds are pretty light here. Northerlies south of Cowgan Island all the way down toward Homer. Northwesterlies cutting across the Barren Islands at 25 knots. Some of the stronger winds on the chart here. 6 to 7 foot seas expected. A light and variable flow inside of Shelikof Strait. Northwesterlies coming off Kodiak Island at 20 knots and 10 to 20 coming out of Prince William Sound. 10 on the inside, 20 on the outside, and 2-foot seas if you're inside of Prince William Sound tomorrow. For Wednesday, the winds switch around to more of a northeasterly direction there, still remaining light. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 20 to 30 with a 5 to 8 foot sea there. Winds are picking up into the Barren Islands, 35 on the eastern side, 40 on the western side, 12-foot seas as you pass the Barrens and get into the west. And for Shelikof Strait, an easterly flow at 40 knots with an 11-foot sea, otherwise an east and southeasterly flow on the north and western side of the Gulf. For the Alaska Peninsula, southeasterlies inside of Bristol Bay, southeasterlies down the coast are a little stronger at 35 knots with a 7-foot sea. South and westerly wind developing there across the Pacific coast with 7 to 8 foot seas, 30 knots from Sand Point and westward down the Pacific coastline. By Wednesday, winds have switched around after the frontal passage. Westerlies inside of Bristol Bay at 35 knots, and down the Bering Sea coast, seas as high as 15 feet. 12 to 16 foot seas there from Castle Cape to Chignik, and further down the coast in the Pacific, you're still looking at 35 to 40 knot winds, though the winds will be changing along the Pacific side. Tuesday, a south and westerly wind at 30 to 40 knots, 40 knots around Unalaska and Nikolsky with a 10-foot sea, 16-foot seas from Kiska to Attu at 35 knots there, 35 to 40 knots along the Pacific coast with 11 to 19-foot seas there south of Adak and Atka. A little bit more of a due west wind as we get into Wednesday. 22 to 23 foot seas there in the west on a 40-knot wind, 9-foot seas to as high as 23-foot seas for Adak and Atka, and you can see the seas coming up there across the Pacific coast as well. South and easterly flow from Gamble all the way down to Macoriuk and the Kuskokwim Delta region. Southerlies for St. Paul and St. George and St. Matthew, 35 knots with a 12-foot sea there on Tuesday. Look for winds to pick up quickly from the west and sharply so, 35 to 45 knots with a 23-foot sea around St. Matthew. Opposing that, an easterly flow cutting across St. Lawrence Island. That puts a low pressure system right about here, and that front will be a sharp one as it cuts into the western sections of Alaska tomorrow night and into Wednesday. St. Paul and St. George, 35 knots with a 19-foot sea on Wednesday. For the North Slope, look for easterlies diminishing 15 to 20 there, 25 knots west of Wainwright. A south and easterly flow even lower from Cape Lisburne toward Kotzebue Sound region at 15 knots. Look for those winds to pick up, though, on Wednesday up to 40 knots on the outside of Kotzebue Sound, picking up for the Chukchi Seacoast, 25 to 30, and 25 knots across the Beaufort Seacoast for your Wednesday. Let's recap tonight's weather, and once again, blizzard warnings are posted for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island, looking for as much as a foot of snow as the system crosses the Bering Strait. And we'll see those winds pick up from the south and east. Wind gusts could exceed 55 miles per hour, making blowing and drifting snow a pretty sure bet as we get into Tuesday night and Wednesday when the worst conditions are expected. A winter storm watch is posted there for the Yukon Delta region. Most of the YK Delta will experience rain and snow and wind for midweek. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.